Hey everybody, once again I'm Jamie Jolly with Blue Dot Cares, and I had the privilege and honor of interviewing Mr. Billy Martin. Billy came in town from New Jersey last night to play a Alzheimer's benefit show at Free Range Brewing in Noda, and we had a great turnout.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yep, and Ghost Trees, this local free jazz band, opened, and if you're seeing this video initially, you might be thinking I'm wanting to talk to Billy about his musical background and experience, but actually what I wanted to talk to Billy about, Billy recently lost his dad. Your dad passed away in October. My condolences, of course, again. And the last time you were here, you were talking to me about what it was like for you at the time, for your mom. Your dad was aging at the time, and I think you were noticing some cognitive changes. And I just wanted to talk about, let's even start there. What were your parents' names, by the way?
Yeah, so my dad is Alan Martin and my mom is Jean Martin.
Jean Martin, yeah. And your dad was how old when he passed?
98.
98.
Yeah, he just turned 99, would have been 99 last week.
Yeah.
And my mom's 91.
91.
Yeah.
That's such a long life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and she still lives at home.
Yeah.
They live, at home.
And she's like on her own? Like any caregivers coming in?
No, she's on her own.
Yeah. It's funny, when I was younger, like in high school, I used to think that 76 was old. I had this like, weird arbitrary number of 76, you know what I mean? And but now I'm like, I still think of 76 as being young.
Yeah, I know, especially when you're around older people, you see the perspectives change.
Yeah. We talked about yesterday about age being kind of a state of mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what when you were here last? That was, I'm looking up at the poster. That was back in 2021. What was it like then? Like what were you experiencing with your parents? What changes were you seeing? Like what was their aging process like then?
Yeah, and it's interesting because we were just kind of in and out of the pandemic, right? So we were all sort of holed up, and my parents, being my dad being in his mid 90s, and my mom approaching 90, like I was really concerned for them because I didn't know how the disease could possibly affect them. And so I really wanted to make sure that they were okay and protected. So I just rushed, I really just got right into gear of delivering their groceries, dropping off essential things that they needed, and not even coming inside. If I came inside, I would be sort of like, be really careful. My dad didn't really understand it. It was just like, because he was already kind of like letting go a little bit of like worries. And maybe a little, I don't think he was into the dementia part then. But basically it was like, just like jumping on the fact that like I need to take care of my parents. Like I'm local, I'm around, I'm not traveling, and then my wife and my son were like essential workers at Whole Foods, working overtime. And so I had this time, so I wanted to really help them. So that the beginning of that, with the pandemic really got me into like, how are they living? How is this, my dad started to show signs of physical, limitations. Walking and getting up was really hard for him. And I knew, I had discussions years before that about like setting them up with some kind of plan. And they were like, we want to live here. And we're fine. Don't worry about us. And so I had to kind of like respect that. But what I ended up doing was renovating which was like kind of a junky little garage room with a junky laundry room next to it that had a toilet, and it was just like old and from the previous owner when they moved in the 70s. Hadn't been changed. It became a storage room. So I renovated that whole thing, or at least oversaw it and redesigned it. So there was a handicapped bathroom and basically like an apartment where he didn't have to, like, if he got to the point where he was not physically able to go up the stairs, that we would be able to wheel him into the,
Yeah.
and so he lived down there the last 2 years.
Did you have the foresight to do that? Was that suggestion, or did you could see the writing on the wall?
Like I had the foresight to do that. I said, if you're not leaving,
mm-hmm. Yep.
and you don't want to go into a home. He'd been in and out of respite care because he had he had this. They never really diagnosed it, but like some days, like I would say maybe there were like 5 or 6 instances where like my mom, he couldn't get up out of bed or out of his seat. And he was like completely, like just like this, like not able to literally get himself up. And I thought, hey, that's some kind of neurological thing, And I'd had to come at 3 in the morning and try to get him up and get him in the bed or whatever, and then the next day he'd be fine. Yeah. So my mom would call the police and have that stuff. Like they would eventually, she wouldn't bother me. He would go to the hospital. They'd check him out, and they would send him to respite care. Yeah. So I had the foresight to know that this could happen more. This could ramp up probably, or it's going to evolve into him being, physically not able to walk. So I'm like, if they want to stay home, then we can have nurse care, some kind of assisted care at home. Then he needs a room. Yep. And he needs to get right to into the shower and the toilet. Yeah. Because the house wasn't designed in a way that there was the kitchen that ground level floor. There was no bathroom. Yeah. So you had to go upstairs and downstairs. And I put railings and all through the house. Yep. But so the renovating the room was like, okay, there may be some day where he is incapacitated, but like care can come to him. Yep. So they'll have that option. Yeah. Yeah. So we, they were able to take some money out of retirement, and we just renovated it. And I had a good friend who was a carpenter, and we designed it to fit their life. Yeah, that's great. I think what you and I were talking about this subject yesterday, and what I do, most people don't want to leave their home. Yeah. You know what I mean? So how do you prepare for that aging process while being where you want to be? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, you have, and that's the part of the planning and thinking. Like some people don't want to talk about it. Yeah. And they're in denial, but they were open to that. Yeah. And I was, I have just one brother surviving. I had 3 brothers, but ultimately my brother Alan and me, were the only sons. So he was kind of like, what are you doing with their money and like what this thing? And then later he was like, it's amazing. Like 2 years later, it's like this is he can sleep down here and have care and get some part-time nurse care. And give him showers. My mom doesn't have to pick him up and get him in the shower and change him and stuff. And it was working. It paid off because otherwise he could be in a home and be paying. Could cost them $12,000 a month just for, and he's home. Totally. So you were talking about your brother Alan. One of the things that I see in my field is I'm always helping families with next steps, and you'll oftentimes have siblings that hopefully they're on the same page, but sometimes they're not. Yeah. So initially he had some like, what are you doing with their money? But y'all eventually lined up on everything in terms of like their care needs. Like, did he ever give you much pushback aside from the finances? Like, was he more like, we need to get them somewhere, or was he kind of on board? He's a little bit more like, he's not as proactive. He's sort of like, let's see what happens and then we'll deal with it. And I'm like, but that's like, I've heard stories where like it's too late then. Totally. So I was like, the first thing that I got into, like I had mentioned before, is like financially, like if they're going to need care, like where, and like, I've heard about these stories where the parents just like, they spend out everything. Yep. And they want to leave something to their family, but they can't. And it's like, how can we, let's talk to a legal advisor. And I set that up. We had meetings, and then they nixed it. Your brother did? Yeah, my brother and my parents. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, I tried. I tried my heart. Like I knew there was. It could. There are people out there that they're there to help this. Next stage of people's lives and setting up the family so that they're prepared, financially and all that. And like they just decided, no, it's going to cost too much money for the legal help. And I'm like, but later.
Yeah.
So we're at that later part.
Yeah. Well, what's so interesting, and so just full transparency, a lot of this stuff I'm learning as we're talking right now. Billy, I haven't had these kind of in-depth conversations about the details. So I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, well, I can relate because I'm going through that with my parents. I'm a big advocate for being proactive versus reactive. Because a lot of people, you're right, they're scared, they don't want to talk about it, let's just leave it as is, but then mom will fall, dad will fall, you're in nursing home, and then you're paying $12,000 a month.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just having those kinds of conversations is super important. And what I wanted to ask, again, with you and the foresight, was somebody advising you to have these conversations about the finances, or did you just see the writing on the wall?
I mean, I have older friends, some mentors that are at these stages, and so, like, it's kind of like signaling in different ways. It wasn't like someone saying, you need to take care of this, but it was like, so it came in different ways, my wife works at a home called Actors Home in Englewood, New Jersey. And that started 4 years ago, but she was definitely an advocate for, like, we need to think about these things, like, so it wasn't like one person, it was like a collective of, like, signaling I was getting from learning about this, because I was concerned about my parents getting older, and I knew that it's you know what it was? Chris Wood's father. He lost his mom. She had ALS, and so lost her a little too early. I mean, anybody too early. My grandfather had ALS too, but Chris Wood's dad sold their house, this beautiful house in Boulder, Colorado, and I was like, why would he do that? Like, like, it's such a great place to live and die, but he didn't have anybody, and he was thinking ahead. He's a progressive type of person, so he was like, he was like in his early 70s, and it was like, wow, like, that was the first time I got that signal, like, he's thinking about assisted living, independent living in a place where, like, eventually we'll transition into assisted living, hospice care, taken care of.
Continuing care.
So his dad had the foresight to do all that. So that kind of was the first, I think that's where it came
That's
from.
Interesting. Yeah, because again, it's not, I think people, when we talked about, you and I did earlier, about how you respond to things, right? And I think a lot of people, when they start thinking about that, they allow that to give them anxiety, and they kind of kick the can down the road. Whereas, like, with what I do, I really try to help people plan for that and have those tough conversations, So could I assume that maybe now that, your dad has passed, and I do want to get back to that experience for you, how has that maybe shaped how you and your wife think about aging or sort of planning? Have y'all sort of, we need to make sure, or maybe not right now because you're still young, you know what I mean? But I guess I'm sure learn from the experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think we still need to make our will.
Well,
I mean, it's like that.
Right.
But we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
We're definitely, I think right now what's on our mind is, like, my mom is down the road 5 miles away. She's the last of the elders in both of our families that we need to take care of. We need to make sure they're okay, and we can't just leave the country or move somewhere else far away. We want to be available, and our kids are, they're in their early 20s, and so we're not going anywhere right now, but we're already anticipating what's the next step after my mom. It's where do we want to be, and what kind of care and kind of facility or just options we have to gracefully, go into our, later years. And so we haven't had any concrete discussions about what that is, but we're certainly learning a lot, listening a lot.
And it's funny because if you actually take the time to have those conversations, you actually will be more in control of your own destiny. Versus having your children going, Mom and Dad are bucking this, we're going to decide for them. And then that's where that resistance comes. And I always tell, daughters or the decision makers, if you will, that the best case scenario is to have them have the buy-in. Right? And sometimes it's getting them to identify sort of what is that, what not what button does it push, but what resonates with them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sometimes it's like, hey mom, your doctor is saying we really need to make these decisions, and it kind of removes you as the bad guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like being proactive and having those conversations really allows him to be more in control.
Yeah.
Or even you and Phaedra, you know, me and my wife, like we can, if we set it up enough, you're deciding your future versus having it decided for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a selfish thing if you're aware of the fact that like this is going to be handed over to my children, this responsibility and these decisions, and I have, that's another thing I have learned from like some of my friends and mentors that are like a generation older. Like some of them have horror stories. Like, oh, you wouldn't believe, it's a mess. My whole family's fighting. We have to go through all their stuff and figure out who wants what, and it's so stressful. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to be there. I don't want to have to do that. So right now we're in a fortunate position where like my dad he's gone and he's left so much material things behind, like his microscopes, his cameras, his, computers, his photographic gear, his like tools. So like I get the tools, my brother gets the photographic stuff because he's into photography, and we're going through that now more. My mom's a stickler about cleanliness and stuff, and has always complained about his basement mess. So it just kind of dealt its hand in such a way that like we can, before my mom leaves, like we'll have my dad's stuff sort of like figured out. It's just my brother and I. So, but anyway, I don't know where we were with that.
Yeah, just really talking about planning for the future.
Yeah, planning. Yeah. So through the other generations, my mentors and older friends, like seeing what they're going through, what they've gone through. I'm just learning from looking at the previous generation, how they dealt with it, and it's like it's classic because I'm the youngest in the family, and I'm always learning from my brothers. And now I'm learning from. It's like we have to look to the older generations and really listen to what they're going through. Because if it's not like handed down in a family traditional way, which is less and less of that. Traditions, there's so many different traditions and there's so many non-traditions, especially in our country. It's so broken up. It's like what, the whole system's, changing. It's like we just have to listen and watch what are these cultures doing, what are our friends doing, and then you kind of like prepare. Okay, I don't want to go through what that they just went through. And then it's like, wow, they seem to be doing it right. Like, Chris's dad, like, it's a generous thing for him to do the work now for himself. And to be able to like, it's almost to my parents and their older generation, it's almost like an outrageous, crazy thing to do. But it's like, no, he's thinking about like, he doesn't want to burden anybody, and my parents don't either. But they don't realize, that the fact that they're not thinking about their, what their future care is going to be, not making decisions now. There's certain decisions they make, like my dad doesn't want to be on life support, and all those things. That helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
But other than that, it's like they didn't want to live at home. It's like, how are you going to do that? You don't want to spend the money on a care facility, but do you realize it could be more or the same having nurse care 24 hours a day? Like you can't get hospice care until you're at the end.
Absolutely.
You learn that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought hospice care was just like, something you could just ask someone, but like you can't get covered.
Yeah. So just to give you some like insight into like numbers or cost here locally, I tell families like assisted living cost here in Charlotte is probably the low end $4,500 to $6,000 a month. Memory care is $7,000 to $9,000, and then long-term skilled nursing, the nursing home is $10,000 plus a month. Conversely, having somebody come into your home, that's roughly $32 to $36 an hour. Multiply that out 24 hours a day, 30 days in a month, you're over $20,000 a month. So everybody wants to stay at home.
That's a privilege.
Right. But you also have to set yourself up. I guess since we're kind of just touched on that, your dad wasn't home for a long period of time, and then he went into a community.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. So my mom was at the end point, like even with getting nurse care, 'cause she had to manage it, right? She had to like, well, she's very hands-on. She wants to know who's in her house, who's,
of course,
and she's so attached to that. So even though he had a separate entrance, there was a separate entrance, which was another plus of having that room. They could pull in a driveway and come in that way, but she still wanted to know who's coming in, and she would want to even have the place cleaned up for them. You know what I'm saying? So. So she was managing all that. She got to the end point. She was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't have him even in the house knowing, like, when the nurses are gone, they only come in for a couple of hours a day to wash him, and maybe twice, you know, like, I don't know how it was like 3 or 4 days a week they would come in and give him, so that was enough for him to be cleaned up and shower and all that. She just had enough, so she was like, someone told her about a place that was like literally 1.5 miles away, and it was an actual home that was, you know, renovated to kind of facilitate, you know, elders, and they got a room for him, and it was like $7,000. They were like, it's $7,000 initially. If he stays longer, it'll go up to maybe 85 or whatever. So my mom was like, that's doable. You know, for now. And so, because he was basically not able to, he was having trouble, like even walking across the room. He had a walker, but even with the walker, he was having trouble. So that we made that move. That was the summer. I think he was in the facility for about 3 months, and he was so careful. Like, he never broke a bone or anything. Even with the falls that he had at home, they were like, he always somehow he managed to not break anything. So in this facility, he got up in the middle of the night or something, and he just wiped out, and he hit his head, and he smashed his ear, and he had to go to the hospital because he was bleeding profusely, and it was like literally inside of, you know, in the inner part, the other side of the ear, the back side of the ear was split all the way down, like, so he needed stitches and everything. And after that, he seemed to be a different person. And he needed rest. It was a traumatic experience, and he was on a pain medication and things like that. So I would say maybe a couple of weeks after that, he was less responsive, but he had come back. Like, he was like, when I came in, he was like, oh, Bill, I'm so glad to see you, and he remembered me and everything, and it's like, thank God you're here. And I'm like, well, you're great, we take care of. So we had a good, you know, he did come back, like, and he wasn't like completely out. He's like, oh, this is fine. When am I getting out of here? I'm like, well, you need to rest, and, you know, and so he was not able to get out of bed or anything like that, and like, so he just kind of like, somehow he just let go, and he was, my mom called me, says he's not responsive at all. His eyes are closed, and he's not getting up, and they're having to feed him in bed, and like, he's not really eating much, and so that was when we knew, okay, let's get the hospice nurse. Well, they knew to do that. And the hospice nurse said, you know what, I think he maybe has a few weeks. And we were preparing for this. I've been preparing for years, like, this can happen. So, and then it was like, and then you know, go visit him, and and it was literally within a week, you know, that the hospice nurse had said, he's like, it could be a few hours, it could be a few days. And so we would just visit him every day, and he was, you know, just looked like he was sleeping. And they did have him on morphine. And he seemed comfortable and peaceful, and sleeping deeply. And the interesting story is that magically, like, we all showed up at the same time, like, everybody, like, it was like, we didn't know if it was that day or the next day or 3 days from then, but it was like that particular day. My son went there. Like, I went there for a second time. My brother was there that day hanging out. And my son was there from work. He just went directly there. He was there with my mom and my brother. And then my other son showed up, my wife came, and I came, and we were all like, we all looked at each other like, this is the first time we're all in this facility together.
Wow.
Like, isn't this wild?
Yeah.
And it was like, he's definitely looks like he's getting ready to go, you know. And so we all, you know, I would just talk to him and, you know, hugged him and held his hand. And then Phaedra, my wife, was like whispering to him, like, it's okay, let go, we're all here. I was massaging his legs, and he just like, he let go within a half hour of us being there just around him. And it was, and my brother was like really moved by the fact that everybody sort of kept saying, I'm so glad you're here. You know, it made him feel really good that we were all there. And then it was just like, and then he let go, you know, he like, we thought he was gone, and then he took another deep breath, and it was like, you know, and I don't know, it was just, it felt right, you know. And I felt really fortunate that we were all there, and the love was in the room, and that he let go at that time. And something tells me that he knew, that he was kind of aware. Like, he has hearing issues, but I had also been told that, like, when someone passes, like, sometimes they could hear you. Even when they pass, like, it's like they say. So we were just, you know, just around him for another hour, and just the love, and the, you know, it was really, he went as gracefully as could go, and I felt really lucky that, you know, we were all there. So like, it was nothing but a good, you know, people say, oh, I'm so sorry, and I'm just like, it was the best way that I could have, you know, experienced my dad leaving. You know, and like, what's interesting is that he's the most important person to me in my life. Like my dad, like I always looked up to him. He was just so loving and generous, and incredible host to my friends, and just like, I don't know, just like, and being a musician, and just being like, just that kind of person that like DIY everything. And so I looked up to him in so many ways, and like, but I had really had a lot of problems thinking about him dying, the years, decades of this, contemplating my dad's death. I had suffered more in those years, and then when it was time, it was nothing but graceful and just perfect. So I feel blessed, you know.
You know, it's so interesting, and I'm hearing you say a lot of this for the first time, is that in some ways those years that you said you'd have difficulty processing the perspective, the potential, you know, the definite, of course we're all going to pass away, right?
It's incomprehensive, like at that time. Like, how could my dad not be around?
Right, but you might have inadvertently prepared yourself because you were thinking about it, you know? And like, I tell my wife this because, you know, I've been in senior living like 20 years, like, we have older dogs, you know, you've met my dogs, and I even said to her for the past couple of years, like, you know, one day we're gonna have to take them to the vet, and that's gonna be the last time. And I say that, she's like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. I'm like, well, I think it's healthier to prepare and to think about it versus it's just such a shock. You know?
Absolutely,
You know, and I also see this whole sort of aging and senior living process, I think is also so important to focus on the positives as much as possible. And the fact that you all were there together and got to experience that as a family is such a blessing, and it's not a given. You know what I mean? It could have just been you, could have just been, you don't want to be all by yourself and everybody's like, oh, I wish we were there. But you were just so fortunate that you were all there together. That's amazing.
Yeah, there's part of me that there's always a part of me that's sort of like worst case scenario, so that I'm not disappointed, you know, like it's so that I'm surprised because some outcome is better than you know. So I have that side of me, but there's less of that, less of that pessimistic and more of the optimistic, and feeling like really fortunate that it went down that way. I really imagined that he would pass in his sleep, and we would be in the middle of the night and we weren't there, or that I was traveling, you know, I was on the road performing somewhere, and that you know, that was just, that's how it was going to go down, and being okay with that too. And it was just like the best case scenario. So, you know, I just think it's rare and lucky to all be there at the same time. I think the hospice nurse is really important, that they really know how close it is. So you can hole up there for the whatever, if they say 3 days, you can just be there as much as you can in those 3 days, and that's kind of how we were already working.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, grandpa, you have to work, we're busy, grandpa.
Yeah. Again, kind of back to the perspective philosophy, hospice in some people's eyes is a negative connotation. Oh, it means they're going to die.
Yeah,
so
right.
that's that death, hospice. You know what I mean? Not necessarily. Hospice is there to support not only the person that is transitioning, but the loved ones.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're just such a blessing to so many families once you're open to that idea. And some people, you might not know this, some people actually come off hospice.
Yeah.
You know, they'll be on
Yeah.
hospice
Oh, really?
and they'll actually not age out of hospice, but get too healthy.
Yeah.
I was like, well, they're actually getting better. If you don't
Right.
need us right now,
Yeah.
call
Yeah.
us if you need us, you know?
Yeah.
But it's such a beautiful service for people, you know what I mean? So
It is. It's a great thing that it's integrated now into the institutional system.
Mm-hmm.
I think the next thing is the death doula, like work that people can do. I think that was ingrained in older societies,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's the next step, like where it's like hospice care, and that like a person is basically matched with a family
Yep.
to like make sure that they're prepared, not just medically, but financially, and all of these things. Like I'm learning because my wife has been taking courses on it, and I think you do this kind of work too. You like make sure that they're in the right facility and the family is happy with that. And I think with the death doula, it seems to be that and more. It's like more personal relationships, making sure that they have the music and the food if they're eating, and the family is comforted, and the family's got all their file, their paperwork together. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And that they go out comfortably.
Yeah. I think I shared with you that because I'm 20 years into the senior living world, and for my first 12, I was an assisted living director, which I loved from the perspective of that I could, shape the energy of the community, right? I could be, sort of how the vibe of the staff and how it feels is a lot of times dictated from the top, right?
Yeah.
I was running, and I was always, open door, like I mentioned, hands-on with the staff, trying to laugh the residents, be zany. I didn't tell you this, but I gotten 2 other guys, and we would actually play a lot of the communities, drums and keys and guitar. But so a lot of that comes from, the top down, and I love that avenue. Managing people I found difficult. That was like, I'm tired of doing this. What I do now allows me to have such direct influence, not influence, but assistance. I'm a lot more personally involved with the families, and that's what I love so much is just, I was talking to a daughter, I guess it was Thursday or Friday, and a lot of times people will call it, Jamie, I need to find a nursing home for my mom. And the terminology, there's independent living, assisted living, memory care, nursing home, and a lot of people really only know nursing homes, right? Yeah. So she's like, Mom needs a nursing home. Well, the more I started talking to her, I was like, your mom is, needs one person to help her get up. She can still walk. She needs standby assistance, bathing, dressing, and toileting. I think she could do okay in an assisted living, which private pay is less expensive than a nursing home, could meet her needs. And this happened just Thursday. By the end of the conversation, she said, I feel so much better. And I was like, that's what I want. That's what gives me so much joy, is to help people feel better about their situation, give them that peace of mind. Yeah.
Well, Jamie, we need you need to train people to be how you are. I think part of it is just, that's who you are. It's so great that you can make sure that the vibe is right and the feeling is right, and then you're giving this great energy, and you love these relationships you have with people. The peer-to-peer thing, it's I think the human connection is really important, and I think that's, if there's any time to have more of a human connection, it's when these things are happening.
Absolutely.
When your loved ones need care and need to find a facility, you need humans to kind of vibe it out.
Absolutely.
And to see and read them. You're reading them, right? It's an intuitive thing. How's this family responding? What do they say? What are the words that they say, and how they communicate? And just imagine if we had a system set up like that, where it's everywhere all the time. It's just built into the community.
Totally.
And I think talking about death doula kind of work is that it was ingrained in older societies. That we have to learn from that, and we have to try to incorporate it. And the problem is that the industry is so conditioned to work on a profit-based situation.
Absolutely.
And, shareholders and all
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
We're all human beings.
Yeah.
Even those people that want to make money.
Yeah. I know you're right. They are human beings, but I think that sort of real, transparent perspective. You know what I mean? And just sort of saying first thought, best thought, like just sort of a fluid,
Yeah.
connection with human beings. I think it's something that it sounds like an obvious thing, but it's not necessarily a given.
No,
You know what I mean?
No, it's not. It's just it's a different system. But like I think we are evolving into better times. Also, it's a good time, as you had mentioned, statistically, we're now getting into more elders and more need for this kind of care. So hey, you people out there that want to get some work, like there's opportunity, right?
Yeah,
to have a good position, helping people.
Totally.
Developing a career, helping people. That's like really needed.
Absolutely. It's only the need's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. You know. One thing that you shared with me that I didn't know that I'd love to touch on kind of twofold is you mentioned Phaedra works as an activities director, and that you started coming into the community to play music as well. Yeah. Maybe tell me about her experience and your experience.
Yeah, well, Phaedra's, she's for the past 4 years has been working at the Actors Home. It's in Englewood, New Jersey. I think there might be one on the West Coast. It's like basically set up through the Union for Actors and Entertainment Industry that support. They built this facility to help elders that are connected to the community. It can even be a family member who is related to an actor or a performer or a technician or a stagehand or a screenwriter or a poet or.
I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah, and it's entertainment community, so and their families. So they have different neighborhoods, the Broadway unit or the memory care, Alzheimer's, assisted living. There's all those different wards.
Yeah.
So I'm learning through her that there's like all these different stages or different conditions that people have to be taken care of, special care in these units. But she works with all of them, and then they have there are some musicians there that are still playing.
Wow.
And so they have these. They have once a month. They have something called the Starlight Lounge.
Nice.
And the residents come out, and then these people who live in the facility with them get to perform.
Amazing.
And so they need a backup. They need a drummer now and then. So I'm there to support them, and then I find a bass player, or like I play with the bass player who's maybe a student of one of the elders. And it's great, and they love it. It's just to see how grateful and moved people are, including the musicians, to be. It's just this sort of this idea that we have. It's like cross generate. We're sharing through the generations.
Totally.
This thing, and supporting each other, and so it's really rewarding just to do that. And my wife is always she's so grateful and excited that I can just shoot over there and set up the drums and play and because she's an activities director and she sees how it affects them, how it really just gives them that energy and purpose, and so her relationship with all these individuals is growing, and she's learning, and I'm learning through her experiences and the challenges and the work that they're doing there. And she's, what's great about it is that she came in there with no degree or she just applied, and the first time she didn't get any response. And then 2 years later, she reached out again for some reason, and they were like, "Where have you been all our lives?" Because they could tell like she was just, they interviewed her. Yeah. And she was like, "I applied 2 years ago." Oh, that's when the person who was
hiring. Yeah.
And anyway, she came in there and basically, she's an aromatherapist, and meditation and arts and poetry and all these kind of activities. She had ideas, and then she worked that in. And no one's doing it. What's great about it is that like she's able to work in her personal things that she's developed personally that are like really useful. She'll spend one-on-one with the elders and like work with like a scent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she makes these botanical scents
Nice.
that different essences,
Mm-hmm.
and she talks to them about what smells, you know, like lavender
Yeah.
or whatever it might be, and she knows who likes what.
Yeah.
And she goes in and massages their hands, and they're like, "Oh my god," you know.
Yeah.
And then she has that, and then she does, you know, they'll have like poetry, or some of the residents, she asks them what projects they want to do. So one of them has a storytelling, like 6 degrees of separation kind of stories.
Yeah.
And so she just manages all these different things, and I hear about it, and it's so wonderful. It's like, it's just so nice to know that there are people in these facilities, that the activities directors that facilitate, you know, the spaces.
Yeah.
And give them a voice, or just give them a reason to get out of their room.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely. You had said something that definitely resonated with me. You said that she didn't go with any kind of degree, right?
Yeah.
But then they were like, where have you been?
Yeah.
When I used to hire people, now certain positions like a CNA, you have to be a certified nursing assistant, but like an activities director, there's not necessarily a certification you need, or maybe like a marketing director. You don't need to have a degree in marketing to be a marketing director. What was important to me was the personality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one of the things I always look for, and still even do in people, are people who smile naturally.
Yeah.
If they just seem like the kind of person where a smile's going to come, they might be somebody I want to work with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, those are definite signals and signs, ways of communicating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's you know, a wonderful person. She's so honest, and you know, just, you know, she cares.
Yeah.
And people sense it, and they pick up on it. And I think it's not something you can really learn in school. You learn from just going through life, and hopefully having the right influences and the right, you know. So it's interesting because I hear stories about a music therapist comes in, and they're like, "Yeah, I have a degree in music therapy," and they have all the paperwork and all of the things that they need to get that pay rate.
Yeah.
To get the job.
Yeah.
It's just like this mechanical kind of thing.
Yeah.
They get placed and they come in, and it's just like, they really, turns out some of them don't really have the sensitivity, or not even listening to what's needed in the space with the people.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, no, this is what this is my program.
Yeah.
And I think that's not the way to go about things. It's like, you have to listen. You have to kind of experience the people, get to know them.
Yeah.
And then give them, you know, maybe someone likes certain kind of music. That's the other thing that's so fascinating. It's like the music that Paige is sharing with me, that I'm like, she's listening to these old classics, man, that are like, you know, from the era of these people.
Yeah.
That she never, and now she's making playlists of this wonderful music that like she never learned about.
Yeah.
She learned through them, and now she has these playlists. She plays them at home for us.
Yeah.
When we're cooking and stuff, and I'm like, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, I mean, this is, and my residents love this. And then there's stuff that there's like, man, they're into Blondie and into like Bruce Springsteen too. They're our generation, like they're 60s and up.
Yeah.
And so learning about the music that makes them feel good, and you know, like listening.
Yeah.
You know, and their response and their suggestions. I want to hear this. I want to see that. So, like, I think it's like interesting to just, that's an evolutionary process that we're still going through. Me being in the music educational field, like seeing the system, how it's set up, but it's very programmed, and it's not about what is this generation into. What is the professional field like now, and what is the unprofessional field? What is that?
Yeah.
What does music in people's life mean? How does it help them?
Yep.
It's not about the industry. It's about just helping people with music.
Totally.
Right? It's not even therapy. It's just like a community activity that is needed in this town, in this, right? And those are the things that I think by listening, we're going to learn,
you
know, how we can help people that are in facilities, how it can help towns.
Yeah, totally.
Bring people together with music.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think we saw that last night,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people that came, so we had the Alzheimer's benefit show last night, and I invited, really everybody that I thought might find it interesting, and I'm sure there were people there who might not necessarily have been jazz fans, but I'm hoping that it opened their mind, exposed them a little bit more, and maybe, like I even said, like challenged them, go, oh wow, maybe I had a different thought or perspective. It's just so important, and it's funny how being both, you're a musician, I play music, and I love music, but
you're a musician.
I am a musician. I know. I'm just in the presence of another great musician. But listening, just that word, and that by definition can translate across so many levels. Yeah. Not just music and sound, but also needs. Yeah. Wishes, desires, dislikes. Yeah. I don't like this, so why would I offer somebody that? Listening is just something that it's something it seems like it's a given, but not everybody does well or makes it a priority.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about that dislike, like, okay, I know what I don't like, I just experienced something, I don't like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, just the fact that you could put a category on it and say that you don't like it, but you know what I do now when I'm not ready for it.
Very good, I like that.
I'm just not ready for it, because I experienced that with Mark Ribot.
Yeah.
The first time I heard Mark Ribot, the great guitarist who played with Tom Waits and Elvis Costello and the Lounge Lizards and bands that I played in my band. First time I heard him, I hated it. I was like, this is awful. Like, does he know how to play the guitar? It was literally that experience. Yeah. And then 2 years later, he was my favorite guitarist in the world, and he still is. Like, I was not ready for, my conclusion was that I was not ready for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe he didn't have such a great night, but I was really, I was like, it was one of these things where I don't need to check that person out ever again.
Right.
And I think that's the problem with people who have negative experiences, is they just weren't ready for it, or it may not be for them.
Sure.
It's like you can't listen to every type of music for the rest of your life. So focus on what your heart is bringing. Go there. What I loved about what you curated last night was that you did challenge the audience, and you did bring something I don't think is common, down here or in certain circles where people just don't get exposed that much to the challenge of what is the genre, the music. It's like you have to really feel it, come to your own conclusion, and the fact that you could do that and raise an awareness and funds. It's a pretty good job there, Jamie.
Thanks, man. I like to say it sort of scratches a lot of itches. You know what I mean? I love throwing a party. That's not the first reason why, but I love giving people an experience. You know what I mean? Hopefully it's one that is, like I said, thought-provoking, right? But also one that, supports you, supports Seth and Ghost Trees, brings awareness to the Alzheimer's Association, brings awareness to Blue Dot Cares. Shout out Blue Dot Cares. But brings awareness just all around. I kind of see it as like a win-win-win-win-win, there was no negative that I could see, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, that going in with that attitude is infectious. We feel your getting a positive, approach just feels so good.
Thanks, man.
And just to be part of something like that, and that it's going to help people.
Yeah.
And it's helping people right there.
Yeah, that's the goal.
As well, so it's a lot to learn from.
Yeah.
And making these connections with new friends.
Totally, man.
Thanks for introducing me.
Absolutely. And I sort of sprung this interview on Billy yesterday, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to sit down with me, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I love the work you're doing. So.
Yeah, thank you. This is Billy's second time down here in Charlotte. The last time was a benefit before a few years ago. I think it was for Pace of the Southern Piedmont, and this time was for the Alzheimer's Association. Certainly would love to have you back down, but
anytime.
Thank you for taking the time, my friend.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.